Ben, great to have you on. I want to get your thoughts on what you're watching for as an investor this weekend. Obviously, we get these GDP targets, but we also have our own Eunice Yoon reporting that there's a whisper out there that President Xi could take this opportunity to essentially entrench Communist Party control over financial and economic planning, technology, private business, too. Do you expect a bigger assertion of power over the markets?
It seems to be par for the course since he was anointed for his third term here. But I think that story is a bit overblown. It won't be a surprise to any of us in the market if there are further kind of golden shares being taken or other party officials being nominated to kind of sit in technology companies. I think this week is much more about what the growth targets will be, how we'll get there, and the efforts that will be taken to stimulate the economy and keep cash circulating. What
do you expect in terms of those efforts? Because we know that the country has been reopening in recent months, and certainly the data even just this week has been pretty strong. I guess how is that recovery process going? And given the fact that the government has already been so stimulative, how much more can be done?
As you said, it's almost a surprise to, I think, even the party officials how much the market has bounced back since the beginning of the year. Not only did we have those record high PMI numbers, but we've seen, road congestion returning to regular cities. A lot of the subway ridership up to pre-pandemic levels. Overall consumption returning to what we expected. And so there's a bit of a fear that they might not pull all those levers of stimulus, might not drop interest rates, and instead will just keep cash in the system to encourage lending and further consumption. So that's the only kind of softening we could expect as a result of this strong start to the year.
Well, it certainly seems like on Wall Street that the China risk is not surrounding economic rebound. It's really the risk around these rising tensions between the U.S. and China. Most recently, these concerns of Russian weapons supplies and potential sanctions that the U.S. could put on China as well. How is that being seen, I guess, from that country and that market standpoint? And how real is that risk to an investor?
It's material. I mean, there's a lot of flash, not as much bang in some of these American efforts to curtail Chinese technological growth. So, for instance, the previous ban that listed U.S. nationals needing to essentially resign from Chinese chip companies ultimately really only affected 100 people. But it did certainly create a huge amount of noise online and led to belief that the Chinese chip industry, at least from a talent perspective, would be significantly curtailed. I expect future efforts, particularly a capital ban, to come into place very shortly. We expected this actually prior to the whole balloon gate delaying Blinken's meeting with Wang Yi. So I think you'll see that in the short term. And so that will, again, I think, not necessarily stop investment into the country, but create a lot of negative noise, which could further spill over and undermine investor sentiment about China.
How are you thinking about investment into the country? Because at this meeting, it's expected to be semiconductor and tech CEOs in, but internet and software CEOs out.
Walking around China right now, it's clear that there is a full-scale effort underway to develop, self-sufficiency in the semiconductor space. Today, they called it kind of an all-country effort, or all systems firing at once, from academia to the public sector to the private sector, all in unison here. So there's an urgency around that, given the actions taken by the Western governments. Obviously, some of those officials, like Pony Ma, taking their name off the list of the event that'll come up next week. So I do think that some of the more traditional technology companies are trying to distance themselves a bit and assuage some of this negative noise. But overall, this is a whole country effort to build its self-sufficiency away from America here.
Ben Harburg, thanks for joining us.